Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Quiet girl in the back of the classroom. Spider web spreading through her mind. Being a good girl, wearing a mask, covering up the beautiful chaos inside. Then she grows up, becomes a woman of respectability. Still a little blind to time, but maps and paper calendars help her get by. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Attention deficiency. Hyperactivity. Sometimes the hyperactive impulsive type, but usually inattentive or combined. Living in a noisy world, full of noisy boys and girls. Tripping birds and machines, exhausted from the mass that keeps her unseen. The talking ghost inside is still invisible. Drawing and playing with crayons on the inside of her skull. They say she's just depressed or anxious or traumatized. But underneath that mask is a little boy jumping on his desk. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. Girl got ADHD. It hurts to do what she doesn't like to do. So because she's here today, we're gonna have a good time and see inside the mind of the girl with ADHD. Jennifer's a doll with ADHD.
So you first learned that you had ADHD well into your 50s. So I'm kind of curious, what was your life and your perception of yourself like before all that?
So I finally, officially through a doctor in my early 50s, got that. Because of my background, I had started suspecting for a while. So I was in education. I was a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher, and I was an administrator. And I would, as I learned more and more, as we learned more and more, I would just note these things about myself. And I would say something to people like, I wonder if I have ADHD. Do I have ADHD? And they'd say, oh, no, you can't possibly. You've done all these things. You have all these accomplishments. And that's kind of one of the things that I think women and even adults hear a lot is, oh, you can't possibly, because these things didn't happen. So I think it's been a process over the years of just gradually learning things and reevaluating things and re-seeing things like, oh, okay, I see. Both from learning, from talking to other women with ADHD, with clients, with listening to things, even things people post on different social media, these things that they're talking about, and all of a sudden it clicks as in, oh, I understand now. So, I'm, what am I now? 58, I'll say it. So, the 70s, 80s, going to school, nobody knew anything about ADHD. If you thought about ADHD, it was the 8-year-old boy who was all hyper and all over the place. And so people didn't know about it. We didn't know about it. And it's really only been recently that more research and information has come out. And even being a teacher, being someone in special education, having a doctorate in educational psychology and a master's in special education, there were just so many things that we just explained other ways. And so, like, I was diagnosed with depression, which that was one of the things when I really started pushing to get evaluated, to get a diagnosis, to see what was really going on, was just wondering, like, is it really this or is it really that? Because as I learned more, there's just such an overlap, especially with women being diagnosed with depression or anxiety instead of ADHD or with it. And kind of ferreting it out is really hard. Especially, I think, the professionals, they don't have a lot of information. So many of them don't know that much. It's like, we know more. So one of the things I talk about is learning to become your best advocate, really learning about yourself, really taking a step back and looking and seeing. And yeah, I did well in school and things I liked, and I did not do well in things I didn't care about. I have graduate degrees. I've done all kinds of things. I've run marathons, but those are things where I can focus in on something I'm really interested in. But on things I'm not interested in, they're actually very hard to do. And that confused me all my life. And it confused, I'm sure, my parents and my teachers and people in my life. Like, how can you be so good at this? Are you being lazy? Are you lying? What's going on? Why don't you do this other thing? And so that's sort of my life in a nutshell. And coming to the points where I was realizing more and more what I thought was going on and getting more information. It's helped explain things. It hasn't fixed everything. There's just still so much to go through, to think about, but it's helped explain some things in a different way. One things I've noticed is that often some of the ADHD traits, especially with women or girls, they're more chalked up to being like personality defects. So you're lazy, or you're being obstinate, or you're not listening to me. Whereas there's other reasons for it than I'm just don't want to do it, or I don't want to listen to you, if that makes any sense.
Okay. So maybe this is a good point to kind of teach us the basics of ADHD, and maybe specifically gearing this towards women, because that's what you do. Yeah, what is ADHD?
So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is kind of a big blanket term. There tends to be 3 different focal points, whereas it can be inattentive, hyperactive, impulsive, or combined, where people tend to be. So inattentive is appearing like you're not paying attention. The hyperactive impulsive is more making these decisions. It's some of that where you see a young boy, I'm just using that as an example, it's not fair, but you think that, or the combined. I think a lot of women are kind of more combined. When we talk about the attention and the inattention, it's more where the attention goes and what you're able to put attention onto. And so for the hyperactive part, while some people it's manifested outward, they act hyper, they're very busy. With some other people, like with me, it's internal, like your mind is still really going. So the hyperactivity is actually in your thoughts. They're going a million miles an hour. You're thinking all different things. You showed me that little graph that you made with all the spider webs, like thinking like that. And so the hyperactive or the focus goes out, and that's how it then can be hard to focus in on something, because I come up with an idea and then I come up with all these other ideas, and this initial idea has been lost. And when you're in a safe environment where you could do that, maybe this idea over here is the one that's really great. Or when you're talking to somebody else who's also neurodivergent or can think like that, you can come up with some really great things. But for some people, this is really frustrating to sit there and watch, because we're supposed to be talking about what we're going to make for dinner, just a really basic thing. And now you're off talking about something else completely different, because those connections, they zap around, especially with something that you're interested in, because you just come up with all these ideas. Your brain is just going, going, going. So that's kind of that part of it. I think I've lost track of what your question was.
Well, it's a huge question. It's this huge blanket question of what is ADHD, which I apologize for asking such a big question, but I mean, I don't expect you to, give me the textbook. Just give me a few pages.
Right. So it's basically a difficulty with attention. And it doesn't mean that you can't pay attention. It's focusing and attending to what you're supposed to do. It can be difficult if what somebody else wants you to focus on is not what you want to focus on. And so that's a big part of it. And it has to do with the executive function. So the executive function having to do with organization and emotional regulation and memory. These all come into play because you struggle with that. And so remembering things, being on time, the emotional regulation can be a big part because people with ADHD can take things very, very hard, very seriously when the person talking didn't mean it that way. So you might be at work and there might be, your boss might not criticize you, but just feedback. And you may take it as criticism. You may take it really hard. And so with work, with relationships, with friends, this can be a hard point of working together, is understanding what the other person really wants. So there's these different areas where people with ADHD are then having trouble kind of processing it. And it's not all uniform. So one person to another person, they have different strengths, they have different struggles. And that's one of the hard parts, is that it's not uniform. And so I think then for doctors, it's hard for them to know what really is going on, because different people are different. Plus, as you've gotten older, you've learned, if you're a successful person, you've learned how to mask, you've learned how to compensate, you've learned how to work through it. It may take a lot of effort. You may be really tired doing that, but you've learned how to kind of work around it, to cover it up, to hide it away, to also then not do things that you're not that good at.
Yeah, but right, even it's not uniform, and that could cause challenges for, diagnosis. But another angle, another way to look at that is it also kind of opens up your lens. A lot of people, including me, kind of write off the idea of, do I have ADHD? You say, well, no, because this is narrow idea out in the mainstream. Maybe it's widening out of this, this overactive, hyperactive little boy. It's externally manifested. But you mentioned how it can be an internal thing, and there's these 3 types. And so, yeah, it's kind of confusing to understand, do I have ADHD? But at the same time, it's like, well, maybe I do. I mean, just because I'm not hyperactive and running around or this or that, and there's a million different people with their own unique version of ADHD, therefore it makes it like, oh, I don't know, more possible. I don't know, not that they want to have ADHD, but also it's probably good to know if we have it or not, right?
Right. And, even there's even basic little online quizzes and that sort of thing. And then some people say, well, everybody has it, or maybe everybody is forgetful. Or just take the example of, if you have ADHD, you often have a hard time doing things you really don't want to do, you don't care about. So unloading the dishwasher. Now, a neurotypical person may not want to unload the dishwasher either, but they go and they do it. Whereas it can be hard to explain, but it can be like physically painful to remember and to get yourself to do it, because it's not a priority and it's not something you want to do. And what makes that hard for you and for other people is then there's something else. I'm researching something, I'm planning a trip, I'm doing something I want to do, and I can just deep dive, and there is no problem, there's no pain in doing all of that. So that can be both internally and externally frustrating. Why can't you just do this? And people tend to think like you're choosing not to, and it's really hard to explain, but you forget, like it slips your mind. It really is something that's almost painful to do. And neurotypical people don't understand that. And it's really hard to explain anyway. Other things are, time blindness. People tend to think so people with ADHD are always late. But the other side of that is that you can also be always early, because the thing is that you're having a very hard time estimating time. It's gotten a little bit easier probably with like maps and that kind of stuff, which will tell you it's a 10-minute drive, a 20-minute drive. But I tend to always be early to something because I don't trust the time. So even if it says it's going to, like, I think, oh, it should take, I can logically say it'll take 20 minutes to get there and I have to park, I'm probably going to leave an hour early, just because there's this management of time that's just very, very hard to do and to explain to other people. Now, sometimes you can also be very late because you've misjudged like I'm supposed to be there at 5 and it's 4:45 and oh, now I need to leave. And it's not simply a matter of you should just plan your time better. You truly lose track of time, if that makes any sense.
Is it because you're so sucked into, like almost addicted to? I don't. Addiction's not a good word, but you're so sucked into the thing you love doing, the thing you care about. It's hard to leave that task.
Sometimes, sometimes, and sometimes it's just I'm just going around the house. Oh, I'm supposed to. Oh, so whatever it is I'm doing is not really that interesting. I just getting to the point where, which then leads me back to how I've kind of learned and been trained to just get there early, like really early, it's because I can't navigate that in between early on time. And it's not like I know some people like they get anxious if they're going to be late. Oh, we have to be there early. We have to be at the airport this much earlier. We have to be somewhere. And it's not this idea that I have to be there 10 minutes early. It's that I have to be on time and I don't know how to make that on time, which seems very weird. I'm not stupid. All these things, but yes, so they tend to you tend to waver between just being really early or being late.
Are there any benefits to this? Like you mentioned how you can come up with ideas and see all these weird connections between things that maybe some people can't see, and your brainstorming abilities are high, etc. I imagine it might help with some kind of creative tasks, or if you do find that thing or that job that fits you, you could probably be really good at it. But yeah, what are some of the benefits?
And I think that you're good at thinking outside the box, which if it's a situation or with other people who are open to thinking outside of the box, but some people in some situations they don't want that. It's like do it like this. Don't ask why. Don't look for a different way. You may have jobs like that or known people like that. So I think that there is. I don't like we're talking about it's a superpower. I don't like any of that. I think it's a different way of looking. I think that you need people who are very much this is how you do it. Because there's a lot of things in life where that's just how you do it. But I would argue that probably most people who have come up with great inventions are neurodivergent because you go through and you think through all these things and you come to different options. Whereas, like, I could sit there at times and brainstorm a billion, not a billion, but a bunch of ideas, whereas somebody else, they might just brainstorm 10 ideas. But at least with my mind or with an ADHD mind, often it's the further you go down those roads that, yes, you can get lost. You can go down the rabbit hole and you've lost 3 hours and you're nowhere. But you can also find that as you go through and think through different things, then the ideas that come to you are actually better. That, oh, that's the answer. Because I waded through the initial stuff. I went through the obvious things and I came to another answer. And this is a good one. So I think that where it can be appreciated, I think, yeah.
Let's talk about ADHD in women a little bit more. Why is there this undiagnosis and misdiagnosis? And you also mentioned that there's more masking going on with women. Yeah, what are some of the, I don't know, societal perceptions or expectations of women, or it could be hormonal things, or I don't know, just any direction you want to go with this. Why is it that women are not seen as having ADHD, though that is, of course, changing?
That is very much changing. One of the initial reasons was that so much of the research was done by men on boys. And so it was looking at through a certain lens and a certain framework at a certain type of person. There has been more research. Things are coming out. It's slow to get that information out to doctors, to therapists, to teachers, to the general public. We all know that since the pandemic, when we all kind of moved back, we had more time to think, and then there were different social media, there was different publications, there was more information going out. It kind of grew. So more and more women, I think, started to really think about it and become aware of it. Many females, many girls are either the inattentive or the combined. And yes, hormones do have something to do with it. Originally there was, you were supposed to be diagnosed or have the symptoms by like when you were 5 or 8, which is kind of young. And that maybe apply for boys, but then they have found over time that girls, when they hit puberty, it comes out more because the hormones during puberty, during menopause, during pregnancy, all these kinds of things, these fluctuations. I'm not that kind of doctor, but there's a lot of research coming out now about how that does impact. I've heard, some people women within their monthly cycle, like there's times where their ADHD symptoms are more impactful, they're worse. About the masking and about the girls, and I can speak for when I was growing up and as a teacher, the girls that I saw, girls are much more likely to be taught or trained to be the good girl, to be quiet. Masking means you're picking up on the situation around you and you're kind of showing back what they want. You are covering up. Like when we had the pandemic and we wore a mask, something's hiding it. You're hiding your expressions. And so girls learning to be more inside of themselves with this, to shut it down when they've said something, when they've asked something, they've been criticized, they haven't gotten help. And so they kind of have learned over time to do this. I know with both genders and with women, it can end up with self-medicating in different ways. And it can also then be seen as depression and medicated that way, which they may also have depression, but those medicines aren't the same. Those strategies, all of that are not the same. And so it's harder for women to break through that. I think it's happening more and more. I think women are getting more information and they're getting better at going into their doctors and advocating for themselves. They're able to say, these things happened, these things are going on, and that's helping. Another thing is ADHD can be hereditary. And so I know of a lot of women and some men who, when their own children were referred and assessed for ADHD, they put the pieces together and they figured out that they also had ADHD. So kind of seeing it in your own kid, your own child brings it out in that you may be more willing to see what's going on and then also get help. Another problem with kind of the assessment process is they have traditionally wanted records. They wanted to see from in school what teachers said about you, what was going on, which there's a lot of problems with that. So I wouldn't even know where to get records if I had to. Your parents may have some and records are digital now, but before they weren't. So coming up with those records. And if you were a quiet girl who sat there and it was internal, there probably weren't any comments where anybody said, I wonder if she has ADHD. It might be she needs to talk more, or she needs to talk less, or she needs to pay attention more in class. But that wouldn't necessarily have pointed to anything. And so getting this information can be really hard, which can then make it harder to get diagnosed again, depending who your doctor is, who you're working with, how much confidence you have in yourself. It can be a challenge to get the actual formal diagnosis. So looking at these things, looking at yourself, you realize and recognize some things that are going on, and then you can start to make some changes, do some experiments, see what helps you in some of your biggest areas so that you can work with it better, whether you have that formal diagnosis and piece of paper or not.
What are your thoughts on the causes of ADHD? You mentioned genetics as being one, but it's a lot more than that, I imagine.
Yeah, I think they're still figuring a lot of that out. It is a lot more than that. I think it's just there's a notice that it does tend to run in families. So there is a decent chance that one of your parents has it or not. I think it's really hard to trace it very far back because, again, you get past a certain point and nobody paid attention to it. Like with autism, with lots of things, it was called something else, or it was attributed to being a delinquent or being a boy or being something like that. And I think that there's just so many things we don't know. Like I said, so much of the early research, and not that early research, was done on boys. So research on girls, women, needs to be done more to find out more, to see what's going on, especially when we talk about hormones, when we talk about things like that. I don't know the other causes. I've read a lot. I've seen things about, the society we're living in, the way that things are. Everything's very intense anyway. I was listening to something and they were talking about, well, if you were able to go somewhere quiet for a month and your symptoms went away, then it was probably just life. But somebody with ADHD, you would still have those symptoms if you were somewhere quiet for a month. It might not be as intense. You might be able to manage it better because you didn't also have kids and a job and all those other things. But a neurotypical person could manage to remove those items from their life and have a calmer mind, whereas someone with ADHD is still going to have ADHD.
Okay, so maybe we don't have clear evidence on how to prevent ADHD. We don't really know how to do that. But are there ways we can manage our ADHD? Basically, turn down the volume of it, reduce the severity or the intensity of the symptoms?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that depends on the person. There's medication, which is right for some people and not right for some people, and that's a personal decision with your doctor that may turn things down, but it may not be teaching you how to manage it. I think being in a safe place to figure out what you struggle with and what helps, what works well, allows you to build on that. So if, like I talked about, like if you're not paying attention and someone's getting mad at you for not paying attention because this is a personality thing and you're doing this on purpose, then you and the other people aren't really looking at what's going on and what to help. Whereas if somebody says, you seem to not being, you have a trouble paying attention, and you can sit down and look at it, and maybe it's the way it's presented, or it's the subject, or it's the time of day, or you need a break, or other things. Not that these are going to get rid of the ADHD, but they might help you get into a better mind space where you can focus better, listen better, that kind of thing. One thing that I noticed with my students and even with me, one of the things is that people with ADHD tend to be really good at some things and apparently not really good at other things. And part of that is the lack of interest. So you don't get better and you don't want to do it. So looking at those sorts of things, you're really good. If you're a student, you're really good at English and history, but you seem to be really bad at math and you don't do your homework and you don't want to focus. Trying to find some middle ground on all of this where we can help and develop and support you in what you do well, and figure out ways to support you in what you don't do well, and figure out how much of that you actually have to do, right? If you don't like math, I'm just using math, don't come at me. If you don't like math and you're not good at math and it's not important to you in your life, after a certain point, you still need some math. You still need to know to do math. Maybe we don't keep pushing you to take calculus and things like that. So from a student standpoint, from, say, a household standpoint, there's all the chores, the jobs that have to be done. And some you like and you do well. And some, like I talked about, it's just like literally painful to have to go and load that dishwasher. So sitting down with your parents or your partner or whoever you're with and realigning things, because they also have preferences, and not ignoring the things you can't do well, but focusing more on strengths and also acknowledging this is just something I don't want to do. And maybe there's other ways. Somebody else can do it, hire somebody who can do it, make some sort of a deal, rewards, all of that. So these are finding ways to help manage it and manage your life, because not everything has to be done and not everything has to be done perfectly. And the other thing that I know for me and a lot of people is that the energy it takes to do things you don't want to do, particularly, and the masking can be really tiring. It can be exhausting, right? Like imagine if you go to a party or you go to some situation or you're in a job interview where maybe you don't feel comfortable and you're trying to put up this front and you're trying to be this certain way. When it's done, you're tired because you've really been focusing. It's not natural. It's not something that's easy, like just sitting there talking to your best friend. That's not tiring. But having to go and do something else and maybe present it a certain way at work or at school, that's more tiring and can lead to overload.
So after you were diagnosed, did any of your behavior or your ability to do things you don't want to do, manage your time, etc., change, or did that awareness and perhaps medication or other kinds of treatments, whatever you want to call them, came in that you just navigated it more easily, but it still wasn't easy? Yeah, how did it change for you?
I think knowing and having the background knowledge together has helped a lot. Shortly after that, when I finally, through a doctor, got diagnosed, my husband died suddenly. And so this added like a whole nother level of everything, which is something I'm also working on with people, is ADHD plus one, ADHD plus something else that adds into it. I think because I have a little more understanding, I'm trying to approach things as experiments, as trying. I've realized some things that I've always done that were actually really good strategies that I just came upon and did. I realized things that are not good strategies that I needed to work on. It's not like I'm cured. I'm just, I think, a little bit more aware of trying to do things. And things still pop up and people point things out to me that I hadn't even realized. Realizing the relationship with, like I was talking about, being tired, like what that does to me, what that does to my processing. I was so last night I was volunteering at a local place where they show movies and stuff like that, old movies, and I was checking people in, and so it was noisy, and I had to listen to people come up and tell me their name when it's noisy, and they're talking to me, and I'm looking for it, and somebody else is also talking to me, and it was very hard to focus in on this one thing. And at times when maybe there was no one in the line, I would take a breath, but I came home very, very tired, very exhausted from I'm supposed to be focusing on this. I've got these other noises, these other people, all these other things happening. And so focusing in, even though I was trying really hard, was challenging.
So the sensory processing is also a piece of this, it seems.
It is. It is. And it can be more with some people than others. But that can be if you're at a restaurant. That was a very noisy, chaotic place, but just a cafe, a restaurant. There's some people, not a lot. And I'm trying to have a conversation with you, but then I'm like hearing, I'm not trying to listen to what somebody else is saying, but you're picking up these other things, but I'm really trying to listen to you, but I'm hearing these other things. And so then that attention, that focus can be hard to keep. And then it can appear like you're not listening to me. And it's like, I'm trying to, I'm really trying to, but there's a bird and there's some people talking over there. And yeah,
And there's also the things you're listening to within your own head, right? The ideas are popping up and here and there. So there's a sensory overload and the external world, but also the internal world is also cranked up a bit. So it sounds a bit overwhelming.
yes, yes. And that's one of the things with ADHD and conversations is sometimes you come across as rude because you're having a conversation and this person's talking and I think of something and it's relevant, it's important, and I have to say it. And some people then take that as you're interrupting. If I don't say it, either I'm sitting there thinking it over and over and over again so I don't forget it, or I forget it.
Yeah. It bothers you if you forgot it, but also bothers you if you don't say it. So you got to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if it's relevant, if it's important.
Yeah. You mentioned experiments. It might be hard to think of them on the spot now, but what are some of the experiments that you tried? And I know it's probably going to be different for each person, but how can we take this idea of experimentation into our life to, discover ways to live better with ADHD?
I really started to like the word experiment because it seems to take some of the pressure off for me. This is just a little experiment. So I've been working for a while now on this idea of doing little weekly sprints. And so, whatever my bigger projects are, trying to break it down into what I could do in like 3 days, like a reasonable amount of 3 days. And so that's been an experiment of how well I'm predicting that, allowing myself more flexibility because maybe this week's pretty open and I could actually work for like 4 hours, 3 days. But next week I have an appointment and there's this and there's that. And so I need to cut it back. And maybe last week I got sick or something happened and I got upset. And so I have to accept that I got less done. And for a person and in a society where it's very, results driven and all of that, that can be hard to do. But for me, one of the experiences that I'm finding really works well is really giving myself this parameter of breaking a task down into, okay, I'm going to do it for this amount of time and that's going to be okay. And so for me, this is working out really well. But other people, and depending what your job is or what you're working on, it may not at all. Other times I've tried, okay, Monday I'm going to work on writing and Tuesday I'm going to work on coaching. But then by the time I get back to Monday, I have forgotten what I was doing last Monday. And it's like I'm starting all over again.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like maybe a pen and paper, or some sort of written, physical, external versions of your mind might help. Google Drive or Evernote or whatever that could. Like I have this mind map here, maybe using some kind of mind mapping software or something. I don't know. Have you found any kind of a ancient or modern technology that's helped?
What I'm liking right now, I always go back to paper planners, paper calendars, and every few months I have to get a new one because whatever, and try to keep, because so many invitations things are sent on Google. So then I've got like this digital calendar that's got those kinds of things that's pretty accurate. But when I'm sitting there making like my lists for the day and all of that kind of stuff, I really like writing it out. There's a new app on, well, it's not that new, on Apple, if you have Apple things, called, what is it called? Freeform, that I have liked. I don't know if you've used it, but like you can put colored Post-its and you can put shapes and then you can move things around. And I've liked it for planning things because it's like fun and colorful. It would be like using a piece of paper and markers or Post-its and that kind of thing. You can draw shapes, you can draw lines, you can move them around. And so for planning out a project or planning out things that I want to do, that's actually kind of been pretty helpful lately in that there's some creativity and some fun to it. It's also on my computer and my phone, so I'm not going to lose it, or it's not going to get put in another doom pile. So those right now are really two ways, putting creative things there and making sure I have a paper calendar.
And you like the design of it. So I imagine you said that ADHD people with ADHD, they're good at doing the things they like and not doing the things they don't like. It makes me wonder too that maybe they're good at using products and things that they find beautiful and they like this thing, the design of it, etc. And if there's something wrong with the look of this thing, like there's an annoying little logo on it or the shape is just like annoying, maybe they just won't use it. So maybe that you like this app because it's so simple and the design is, you like it.
Yeah. And so then I use it.
Yeah. But if you don't like it, I guess it's not just ADHD, people with ADHD, but it makes me think just that, there might be a bit more sensitivity towards ugly or noisy things. But I think that might be individual for sure.
Right. And so, like, a neurotypical person would probably be like, I think this is ugly and stupid, but if I have to use it, I'm going to use it. Whereas there would be more resistance to using it unless it was like, you have to for your job.
How about food? Some people may be more or less sensitive to food, and this is not exclusive to ADHD. And there probably aren't foods that this food or this supplement certainly helps, or these ones certainly harm. It might be easier to pinpoint the ones that certainly harm or have a high probability of making things worse. But yeah, how would someone go about navigating this food/supplement world? And are there any answers to this that we can generalize?
I think talking about like the nutritional aspect and the supplements, I would talk to a doctor or a nutritionist. There's the basic fact that you probably are doing better if you have eaten and drunk some water. When we go back to the deep dive, it can be hard to remember to eat, to take that break, to eat, to drink water, to go to the bathroom, to do those kinds of things. That can be hard to remember. Sometimes people with ADHD talk about they'll like to eat one thing for a while. I mean, like, so for breakfast, for however long, I'm going to eat this, and then I'm never going to touch it again. You reach this point where you're like, this is my favorite food, and then I will never touch it again. I'm just sick of it. It can also be hard to figure out what to eat in that there's these ingredients. And I like to cook. I used to cook a lot with cookbooks, but it can be hard to figure out what to eat because you're tired and now you've got to put these steps together to figure out what to eat, which leads to a lot of DoorDash.
Okay, so it's a complexity of making the food, but maybe also the annoyance or energy expenditure it takes to decide on what to eat. So I don't want to decide. I don't want to do anything. Just give me the food. So let's just eat the same thing every day, like a dog or something.
Yeah. Yeah. This is my comfort food for now. And then, the joke is you go out and you buy all this at Costco or whatever. And then you're like, I'm never touching this again. And textures and things like that can have something to do with it. But yeah, that can all play into it.
You mentioned earlier about safety, feeling safe in the environment, the relationship with the coach or the therapist or whatever. That is important, and that kind of makes you think there could be a connection between ADHD and trauma or something. And maybe this is not. We can't say everyone with ADHD has trauma, but what have you found at that sort of intersection between trauma and ADHD? And then if you find out that, say, the person you're coaching does have some trauma in their past or currently, how would you change the way you coach them or help them or yourself? I guess in this case you might just be doing it all yourself without a coach or something.
So what I have found is that when you're looking at ADHD and you're looking at trauma, grief, things like that, it's like the ADHD makes it exponentially harder. I've been seeing a therapist after my husband died, and she knows a lot about grief and all of that. And yet she does not know much about ADHD, and not because she's not, a very smart, educated woman. And so I've had to spend a lot of time like explaining things to her, things like emotional regulation, which if you've been through trauma, you probably have trouble with emotional regulation and triggers. The ADHD makes it more. So you have more trouble with emotional regulation, with responding to triggers, with taking a step back. So they kind of mix together. There's going to be some factors that are just ADHD and some that are trauma, but they seem to bubble together and make it more. And so knowing this, knowing basic things about trauma, knowing basic things about ADHD, and knowing how this mixes together with you or your client can help slowly work through and figure out some things. And then that's one way of getting back to the experiments, trying, one little thing, there's meditation and mindfulness and breath work. But even with that, because I've done some trauma informed yoga and breath work, depending what your trauma is, different kinds of breath work may set you off more, depending what happened, certain yoga poses. So an awareness of what the trauma was and how you're responding to that, and how then to work with that, and how to see if the ADHD is impacting it, is making it more. So if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So that's ADHD plus trauma. You've also been working with other combinations, ADHD plus X plus Z plus Q, whatever. Well, what are some of these other common combinations, and how do those differ? I guess it's not just two things. It's going to be plus, 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 plus.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's just keep a simple equation for now.
I have grief. I was run down by a guy on a bike last fall, and I have a head injury now. So, that adds on to it. It can be other learning disabilities. And so if you have a visual processing disorder, auditory processing, and so those processing issues are impacting how you hear things, see things, learn things, the ADHD is adding to it. So maybe we know that with auditory processing, it's like sometimes it's like a big Venn diagram almost. So like this is your auditory processing or your autism or your brain injury or whatever, and this is the ADHD. And there's a center part, and the center part can be bigger or smaller, but really trying to see what parts of those are coming out with you. Because, whatever you say about like an auditory processing, not everybody it doesn't show up in everybody the same way. So really taking time and energy and space to see this is how it's impacting me, because that's what this is about. It's how it's impacting you, how it's making it hard to live your life, how it's stopping you from maybe being better employed or happier, better about yourself. And so looking at it that way, and then depending what's happened before, you may feel bad. You may have bad stories you're telling yourself about the ADHD that are not helpful. I'm stupid. Why am I always like this? I'm always late. I'm lazy. And so it does all kind of like add plus, plus, plus. And so what are you struggling with? Where can we start to build up some strategies, some confidence, some easier ways of getting through the day?
Do you have any advice for coaches and therapists and people that you've learned? I guess it could also be advice to yourself when you first started this coaching educational journey.
I'd say realize what you don't know and go out and read books or do research. And also your client, whether they know it or not, they probably know a lot. Like they may flat out be able to say X, Y, and Z about this, or they may not realize they know it, but in conversations, what's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? If I talk about this, how does that make you feel? Do you get defensive? Does that sound interesting? What do you think? Because it's actually about you. And in there, you probably have some really good ideas. We just need to get them out. And then the therapist, the doctor, the coach, the teacher, listen to podcasts or subscribe to or become a member of like CHAD or things like that, organizations that have information, have access to recent information. You don't have to go out and read all the scholarly journals, but just kind of like start to have those conversations, start to learn more, realize, oh, hey, I took one class on disabilities and one day was about ADHD. I probably don't know enough.
Actually, you mentioned Chad, and I didn't know about that. What are some other resources that are out there that might help people? Of course, there's like tons of books and YouTube videos, and there's too much perhaps, but I don't know what these resources are. So what are some of your favorites?
There's some good podcasts. I'm sorry, let me pull this up on my phone. I just found out about it. This was like a 6-part one. It was called Climbing the Walls. It's from understood.org. Understood.org also has information for parents and teachers and people about different disabilities. And it's 8 episodes. And she, the woman who did it, set out to find out why so many women were being diagnosed during the pandemic. But then she goes down some other rabbit holes and finds out more information. She talks to a couple of women who are older now, who, when they were actually very young, got actually diagnosed. And that was an interesting perspective. I think I've sent it to everybody. I know I recommend podcasts. I sent it to my therapist. You have to listen to this because I think that, especially in the first couple episodes, she really talks about what it was like for her and finding out things, how that felt. I'm not sure if there's maybe if you didn't know you were under trauma or you had been abused or something like that, and you start to find out things, there may be a similar sense of, oh, like realization, like understanding, like being seen. But so that one is really good. I Have ADHD is a good general podcast.
Is that the Kristen Gardner one?
Yeah.
I think I interviewed her. Yeah, I interviewed her. She was great. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great. Those are some good ones. Suri Solden has a couple of really good books about women. Yeah, I would start with those.
No, that's enough. And from those, the spider web starts spreading, and you find new things each time you listen to one episode. You'll hear another something. So that's fine. And if people want to work with you or learn more, where can they go? And maybe also explain a little bit more about your process and how you work with people, how you coach them.
So my website is adhdholistically.com, and I'm on Instagram and Threads at adhd.holistically. There's a little dot in the middle of it. I'm really working a lot in shorter term, smaller kind of sessions. The idea that subtle shifts lead to big impact. We can all sign up for a year-long coaching course. And especially with ADHD, from my personal experience, is you're going to burn out and you're going to forget, and it's not going to work. So what I'm really liking is finding one small thing to really work on, whether it's something that's really impacting your life or a low-hanging fruit. And in 3-4 sessions in a short amount of time, let's really look at what works, what doesn't work, finding some solutions and building some success there. And then you may find that you can take that to other areas, or then you want to work on something else. So that I find, because that works best with me. I also like things like body doubling, and I think I'm going to start offering some Zoom body doubling. If you don't know, it's co-working. It's this way. It's kind of like parallel play for children, where you get together but you're working on your own things. And so your mind and your body says, oh, it's work time. And so we work, we take a little break and we work. And I find that is so helpful. And that's one of those things that I always tried to do when I was growing up without understanding why it was helpful or what it was about.
Do you have any stories you can share from some of the people you've worked with? Or like some general phenomenon that you've seen? I guess you want to keep the privacy. That's the issue. But what, if anything, can you share? And you can say, no, I can't. And that's totally fine.
Well, something that's fun is I find both with me, and then other people talk about this too, is when you meet up with somebody who also has ADHD and you both realize it and you both kind of connect. It's like meeting up with your best friend or a long lost sister or somebody. It's somebody who, when you realize that you're both there, it's like this instant click, because you can have those conversations that go all over the place and you're both following it. And if by some chance then you are both very interested in the same thing, it's like you've known each other forever. And so this can be hard because meeting neurotypical people or people who aren't like that or who are masking, conversations can be very superficial. So you may be out somewhere at a party or whatever, at a coffee shop, and you meet somebody and it's another one of those deep dives. You just had this whole huge conversation about one thing or many things, but you are both on that same plane, and you walk away feeling seen. You feel like, okay, there's somebody else out there like me. So I think that that's one of the things that makes me happy, either when it happens or when I hear other people talk about it.
That's super interesting. It kind of helps you understand, like looking back on your life of the people, the friends you made along the way, even if it's just during your travels for a day or two, you met this person, you just connected. And I love that guy, that girl. We were friends instantly. And then now looking back, you might be like, oh, maybe she had ADHD. Maybe she had this or that. So when we find people who are similar to us, of course we're gonna dig into them and and melt into each other or whatever. But if both people have ADHD and there's that just enthusiasm and focus on both ends, man, that can lead to a really deep connection pretty quickly. But then on the other side, like you said, if there's people who are too normal, you might just not even give them a chance because they're boring or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, that's another conversation. And anyway, thank you so much for today. I enjoyed this one. And thank you for sharing the resources and this whole big, wide overview of ADHD with this special angle on women. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really enjoyed this time together.
Yeah, me too. And if you have other questions or anything, just email me, reach out to me, and no problem. But thank you. This was great. I love talking about this.